All right, I guess it's 6:10. I'll call to order the Rutland Select Board meeting. It's a joint meeting with the Ad hoc Bylaw Committee. However, I don't think they have a quorum. It's 6:10 on Thursday, November 30th. We're meeting in the lower level of the Rutland Public Library. There are 2 members in person, Harry and myself, and 2 members on Zoom currently, Tom and Jen. So we're kind of doing the total hybrid meeting tonight. And Peter from the Ad hoc Bylaw Committee is here in person. We are obviously on Zoom, we're being recorded, televised live on local access and recorded for re-airing on local access, our YouTube channel, and other media outlets. I will start with the pledge, Harry, Peter and I.
Let's do it. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I think we're going into the bylaws. I know Peter had sent an email, and I think voiced some concerns, that we wouldn't be finished at the meeting, getting through the bylaws. I think we've been working very diligently and schedules have been tough. We also, seem to be reviewing the bylaws word by word, and I'm not sure that that's necessary either. So I think I want to thank the board for being as amenable to spending time to get through these and pushing it as a priority. I know it's not my most favorite thing to do, and I think it's one of the things that we need to do. It's been ongoing since I've been on the board, so I would really like to see us get them before town. So I appreciate everyone's flexibility to work on these. So I kind of need to say I took a little bit of an exception that the blame was placed on us as not reviewing them fast enough. And I think we are doing as much as we're making a very forthright effort to get through them. So I think the conversation has come up as potentially doing a Saturday kind of workshop style to really get through them. Just the conversation here was probably more than a morning. It would probably likely be a whole day, or a good chunk of the day, from Peter's perspective. So I'm not sure if anybody has looked at dates or anything yet. And we have the meeting date set that I think the board had concerns about it being as early as it is, and that was deemed to be an appropriate time based on the town clerk and the ad hoc bylaw committee's input. So I think that we were forthright and upfront about the timing, not that it was gonna be tough timing to get through everything, but that we were making that commitment. So I just want the board to know how much I appreciate the work and the time that we're all putting in for this. So thank you. Peter, we can talk about dates after. We'll see. We got a little bit of a late start, but we'll see. I know a couple members might be off and on around 7:30, so we'll see if we push all the way to 8 or if we try to wrap up as closer to 7:30. Again, I know the timing, we could benefit from the extra time, but we'll see how it goes.
So something before we get into bylaw review, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I see happening and the dates that I see them happening. We have a date for town meeting, we know that. We also know that means we have a date that the committee evaporates for all practical purposes. Hey, Paul.
Greetings. I still know how to take a nap.
I kind of wish I had taken one already, but oh well. So in order to do that, it is my intention to pass warrant articles for inclusion at the town meeting that cover the entire body of bylaws. This body will decide what it will and will not place. But in order to do that, we need legal review. So my intent is to pass these off to legal, to town council on or about the 18th of December, to give us roughly a month for legal review and then a month for public information sessions, and then we're at town meeting.
So I think those dates would have been helpful to have kind of when we set the date. We knew we had to do the town meetings and we knew we needed to do the legal review. But even when we set the town meeting date, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago at this point, it felt like it was coming very quickly. And then obviously there was vacation times and holiday, and our regular agendas are full as select board. So we've been trying to make the commitment to meet at least once every week, if not more. So I just wanna, I think some of this is a little bit of the frustration on my part, that it seems as if the select board is being thrown under the bus for this. And I feel like we've been very diligent in trying to get through them.
You have certainly done a very, very thorough review, and more thorough than any other board iteration before this one. And let me actually second what Leah said earlier. I do applaud and thank the select board for their review. The process is the process. And we know where we are and we know where we would like to be. The only question to me is how far do we get there in the time that we have available? So, as to those dates, they were made this week. Well, I'd actually discussed with the bylaw committee at our previous meeting the dates of the public information sessions, which are the last 4 Sundays, leading up to the town meeting. At least that is my intent today. But from there, it was, how long does town council need to review them? And I suspect, based on previous performance, that about a month with the Christmas holiday in between, I hope that's enough. But we're pushing every lever that we have to try and get us through this.
Okay.
So I actually also wanted to feed that information now before we talk about, that's why, Leah, I appreciate pushing off the discussion about a Saturday, to give you folks time to think about what I've said as we continue through this. Let me share this. This is where we are, at least in terms of things that have not yet been reviewed. We last did AgCom and bylaw, now we're up to Council on Aging and Earthworks, and that ends chapter 5. This bylaw is very similar to what it was before. The biggest change is that we rework the purpose based on what Mass General Law says about the Council on Aging. And then for members, we've removed all the things that were duplicative of the appointed committees. So I find this interesting that we have an entire bylaw that says nothing more than, here are the members of the Council on Aging, which the size is set every year by the select board to be 3, 5, or 7. And there may be up to 2 alternate members.
Question. How many serve there now? Do you know how
It's
many serve in the
5.
COA?
I'm trying to look, I don't remember off
Well,
the top.
my ultimate question is, has that remained the same for the last
No,
years?
it has not.
Okay,
And I think very recently, since I've been on the
That's right.
board, we made this switch to the 3, 5, or 7 set yearly.
Exactly.
Because there was concern, there's not always, sometimes they were having problems meeting quorum, but we didn't wanna limit, say it was only a 3-member board, because there very much felt to be the benefit to having a larger board if we could have members serving.
okay.
And so in order for them to be able to have a quorum and be able to meet, we wanted to have some flexibility, I think was the
Exactly right.
conversation.
That is exactly the way I remember it as well.
And that was I'm pretty sure that was since I've been on the board, so it's been a fairly recent.
Okay. I was just curious, I
Change.
mean, you know, you're more or less, I mean, if we set how many there are, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, 2017 actually is when it was
Last
changed.
done, okay.
So that was right before, that was right before I was on, but yeah.
Yeah, that time period, you were paying attention then,
Right.
sure.
Yeah, so it looks like there's currently 5 members seated, and so it shows as 5 members being seated and then 4 vacancies. Oh, two full vacancies and then 2 alternate member vacancies, because I think it also talks of this and AgCom, I think, are the 2 that have
Alternate members.
alternate members.
Is there a reason, I'm curious, just comparing to what we just went through with Historical Commission where we had a 7-member board and we just brought it forward to change that to a 5-member board. Is there a reason that this specifically says it needs to be done year to year versus just make the adjustment as needed like the Historical Commission did?
Well, the fast answer is because it's a bylaw, you can't just wing it. You can't change the size of a body that's defined in bylaw. So it must, in order to have 3 1 year and 7 the next, the only way to facilitate that is to have a bylaw that supports that and then have the select board choose the size. The Historical Commission cannot by itself decrease the size. It can't. That is a function of the select board and the charge of the Historical Commission. Unless there's something specific in Mass General Law about it, and I don't think there is. I don't know of any board in the land that gets to just select its size on its whim.
But
No, I understand that, just, bringing it before the select board for the
Yes.
approval. I'm just wondering why it's called out here for Council on Aging. Why do we have to define it at all if we can have the select board decide it's always gonna be 5 members, for example, and then it gets changed if it comes before the board again with a request for some reason?
I don't know for sure. It's interesting, Jen, I was just looking because not all of the boards and commissions have bylaws. So
Right.
I don't think that there's a historical commission bylaw specifically, so that's not anything rooted in bylaws. So that I don't know legally what surrounds historical commissions.
I would have to
seating.
track that down, but I would bet that that they define a range of sizes, no fewer than 3, no more than 9, is something I have seen, for example. And so, because the bylaw was written, and because a bylaw is responsible defining the size, Council on Aging requires the vote in order to set the size. Yes, Tamika?
Oh, it worked. I didn't know if it worked. Thank you, Peter. I was just going to say, it does state in MGL the size of the historical commission, and the only reason I know is I verified it when they had come before the board to request that change.
So what does
So
MGL say about historical then?
I'm trying to remember. I think it's what language like you said, where it can be no less than 3, but no more than X number, and I don't remember what number that is.
Right, so it is
Yeah.
a variable size set by the town.
Correct.
Okay.
And now in terms of Council on Aging, they need a bylaw, I believe, because they have alternate members.
Okay.
I believe that the bylaw is required to make that happen.
And are alternate members dictated by MGL?
I don't remember exactly, but there was no conflict. When we did the analysis, there was no conflict with MGL.
No, that's not why I'm asking. It's interesting that there's, I think, only 2 boards that have alternate members. And many boards we either have issues filling vacancies, or they have issues meeting quorum, especially depending on the time of year. So it's just an interesting, and the conversation before, if I remember correctly, in AgCom and stuff around the alternate members is how involved are they in every meeting? So if there is the need for an alternate member, how up to speed are they on some issues, I think is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about anybody, I don't see any, really, we're questioning some protocol, I guess, but I don't see any issues with this. In terms of if they need alternate members, fine. If the board gets to set by MGL, whatever numbers there are every year, that's the way it is. If alternate members shall have voting only for the purpose of obtaining a quorum, that one sounds interesting to me.
So if they don't have quorum, then if they're short quorum by one, the most senior alternate member is the
Right.
one who votes in place of
Right.
of an absent member.
That's a little twist that I haven't seen before. But no problem there.
I mean, I think if it spells it out, how, cause that was some of the question I think for AgCom was how do you determine which alternate member is
Right,
participating or whatever, where this at least it specifies
yeah.
how that works.
Yeah, and just to echo what Harry said, I don't have any argument with it either. I was just questioning it just based on my recent experience, why it was called out here, but it sounds like that's
But
due
yeah,
to the
you know more about the historical stuff than I do, so I was just, that could be well an issue that we may need to take up, but for this, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any issue either. Yeah, I was just curious.
Tamika, your hand is still raised. Do you have another question?
Nope, false alarm. I didn't know I had to put it back down. Alrighty, there we go.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm good.
And Tom, Jen, and Tamika, with you guys on Zoom, I know Peter can probably see the screen, but we can't because he's screen sharing the bylaws. So feel free to just kind of interject to be heard or whatever, for the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Harry and Jen. I don't see any issue with this.
What?
He agrees with you guys. He doesn't have any issues, so.
Yeah.
Alright, so should we move
But
on?
I mean, to the point, I do believe that there is value in adding the longest tenure to
Any
AgCom to
alternate.
clear it,
Right.
Yeah.
to clarify, I should say. There are no duties, all duties are as specified in 48B and 21. And because they have not historically been specified, we didn't change anything about this for this
I think
bylaw.
that would be more of a policy or like a charge mission thing set by the town versus
Yeah.
a formalized bylaw.
Okay. Moving on, the Earthworks Board. This is just like the current version, except that everything that was specified in the appointed committee's bylaw was stripped from here. So we don't say it's they elect their officers, and we don't, all of those things, we just strip them out. Other than that, this is the same.
And this is a fairly new bylaw in town, I think.
Yes.
So there had been conversation, I vaguely remember at town meeting and everything surrounding it, and I think it looks like 2017 was when it was adopted officially.
Yes, adopted in 2017, and wow, it was restructured a lot in 2019. And that, the other change from 2019 was giving the authority to write regulations, which was not originally in there, but that was an omission.
So, not being around then, what is the purpose of are we just saying that they are to oversee when any piece of dirt moves from one place to another?
They regulate and enforce movement of earth.
How do they enforce?
The powers given, they can cite, they can fine, they can cease and desist, they can it's all subject to the other bylaws that are in place. So there's an earth removal bylaw today that specifies the actions that the Earthworks Board can do to enforce.
The reason I ask this, I guess I'm a little confused in that we have a agricultural bylaw that specifies certain things. So if a farmer brings in dirt or takes dirt out, that the Earth Board has to be involved in that?
Unless it's regular agriculture, a normal agricultural activity which is exempt from earth movement, from earth removal.
All right, so that, ag and
There's all-
this is like blowing my, okay.
Yep.
But this is not, if I understand correctly, earthworks is not specifically limited to agricultural use,
Oh,
right?
no, no, it's
It's
all
construction and
Right,
everything.
it's everything else, but
Right.
most of the earth that you're, is either on buildings,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
putting in development or in farming.
Yep.
That's where you're seeing most of it. So that's why I asked what was,
So the scope of the earth removal bylaw is broad. The Earthworks Board is working on a more comprehensive earth movement bylaw instead of just earth removal.
okay.
But that's not ready, so people will hear a lot more about that in the new year.
Peter and Harry, if I could just say one thing.
Yeah.
The only thing I know about this board is when I first came to town, or was it, maybe a little after that, I remember Jeff Stillings brought up a lot of issues. Because unfortunately, a lot of the people on this board at that time, I'm not saying now, but a lot of people on this board were also builders.
That, well, actually, let me correct that. There is not a single builder and never has been a builder on the Earthworks Board. The only person on the board who has specific knowledge is the representative for Agricultural Commission, who happens to own a business that moves dirt.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember the argument
Yep.
coming up, but it was a while ago, years ago, but I remember that being spoken. So.
Yeah, I know words like that have been said, and those words have been wrong every time they've been said. And like everyone else subject to ethics of boards and commissions, then when he has a conflict, he recuses himself, as he has.
Peter, the membership, is that set by MGL?
No, this is completely made up by Rutland.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Just curious.
since I'm here, I will say that if anybody can convince the Board of Health to send us a new representative since the last one left, it's been a couple of years, it'd be nice to have a complete complement, but I've been unable to drive them to send a rep.
Maybe Austin could work on that.
Perhaps.
Okay.
So because this board, so if I go back in time, this was created so that we had broad enough knowledge of the different issues in town related to the movement of earth. That's why we have Concom, Health, Planning, and AgCom.
Okay. So we had some issues in the town before this was done.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The earth removal bylaw that's been around for a long time originally had the Conservation Commission as the authority for granting the permit. And that was moved over to the Earthworks Board at the same
Okay.
time that we created this board. Because frankly, the Earthworks Board, actually, the Concom, while it has its jurisdiction and its knowledge, it was the feeling of the entire Concom that other organizations should be involved to make sure we had the right perspectives.
I mean, I'm currently okay with this the way it is. It's a fairly new bylaw. And I think that any feedback would be better pursued through like the bylaw committee if there wanted to be significant substantive changes. You know, I think I have voiced often that I kind of have viewed this as just being like codify. My hope was to have them codified and streamlined and everything. So I'm hesitant to make a whole lot of additional significant changes, but
I agree. I don't think that, I think it's fairly new, and if we haven't had any issues, I mean, we're granting some pretty good powers to this board in terms of overseeing earth movement in this town. I'm just curious if we provided them with enough enforcement issue because of the strength of what they have to oversee. Cause I haven't seen anything here yet, so.
No, but it's all in the bylaws that this board enforces.
And I think, I mean, to your point, Harry, I think across the board, Rutland's not an enforcement heavy town, so there's I think that's something that's come out through reviewing a lot of the bylaws, that a lot of official enforcement falls to the building inspector, and does that make sense, and is that the best use of that person's time? And is this a town that wants to be enforced, like automatically default to enforcement over everything versus working with the potential conflicts? I don't know. So I think it's a good point, just that.
See, I'm not looking at, if I might, Lee, I'm not looking at somebody throwing a shovel dirt across the street. I'm looking at some major stuff here. That could be either costly to the town in the future because it's done, environmentally unsafe to the town because it's done. That's what I'm kind of looking at for this, and what enforcement do we have for something like that? I'm not.
Right.
The building is, if we're taking dirt out of a lot to build a house and put a foundation in, I don't even know if they have regulation over that. That would be somebody else, unless they do have regulation over that. So I'm not looking at that one piece here. I'm talking about massive or a major thing that happens if somebody comes into town or whatever and does that.
Now, I have to say, the current earth removal bylaw as written means that shovel of dirt is subject to permits, to permitting. The earth movement bylaw that we're talking about is going to ignore the small stuff and only pay attention to the larger quantities, because that's the only thing that makes sense for the town to track. The town doesn't have an interest in one dump truck of dirt being brought in or pulled out.
Okay.
We're working on it. As I say, you'll hear more about that in the new year.
Well, that's kind of nice to hear that, because we don't want to be enforcing shovels of dirt.
We don't,
We're not in that business.
We don't want to do that. We on the Earthworks Board, I'm a member, so I get to say, we don't want to be in that business. We want to do things that make sense for the town and for the residents.
Right.
And the businesses. We all have to work together.
Okay.
So,
But yeah, I see your point.
now I'll also point out that we are not reviewing the earth removal bylaw because there are no changes to that being proposed.
Okay. Okay.
Jen and Tom, are you guys okay with moving on?
Is this the end of it, Peter?
Yep.
Yes, that's the end of it.
It talks about members at large, but not alternate,
We don't have alternate members.
not on this one.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I'm good with it. As
Are
is.
you okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, the member at large, I think, came after the initial.
I don't think so. I think, no, it would have had to be here because that's how we made a 5-member board.
Okay.
Now, I don't think it was filled immediately as the rest of the seats were. At least that's my recollection, as bad as it will be.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think oftentimes the members at large are a little bit more outreach done, because that's pushed out to the community as a whole.
Right.
And time to solicit interest, and then meet, talk to, interview, whatever. Whereas often for the boards and commissions, at a regular meeting, they talk about, hey, we need a nominee to go on this board or whatever, and it's appointed. An interesting, and this is not, but an interesting kind of consideration is, for some of it, I think had come out that it doesn't necessarily have to be a member of that board or commission, but it could be a designee that, and I don't know specifically for this specifically calls out a member of conservation, a member of, I think it was economic development that said representation from like planning and select board, and the wording I think was different.
It probably was, but EDC, doesn't have a bylaw, so I haven't read it.
No, right.
But yes, we specifically want members of each of these things. We want them to be those members and not other designees.
It doesn't be of the, looking at it now and seeing that it specifically calls out a member of is very clear that it's a sitting appointed member of the board or elected member of the board. And it is, so conservation and ag are appointed and planning and board of health are elected. So there is some diversity there and in amongst the fact that it's an appointed versus elected representation. And then there's an appointed member at large, which is just.
Does that one member at large fall under the appointment committee program?
Yes.
Okay.
These all do.
Well, not the elected.
No, we have to,
No,
the select board
the
still
select
agrees.
board appoints every member to
Oh.
this board.
Even though they were elected on that
They're
board?
elected on that board, they are
Okay.
appointed to this board, and they come from that board, but they will have their own decision-making process who that member will be.
Okay.
And generally, this follows a slightly different process in that instead of being it's a recommendation of the committee or the commission or the board that's the person that's going to be seated. So it's not a letter of support from the chair.
Right.
It's the entire committee has taken a vote or had discussion and
Right.
everything that should be the person
Right.
going on.
Okay.
Anything else on Earthworks Board?
Nope.
Well, that's the last multi-member body. Oh, public and private ways. Public ways! So this is probably badly named. It was better when, it used to be called highways,
Okay.
but now it's called public ways, and because we didn't like the connotation of high speed only. And really it should be called obstruction of public ways. This entire bylaw is don't put snow in the road, don't interfere with emergency services, and don't put junk in the roads. That's what it says. And if you do, there's a fine in the fine table.
This is kind of my trivial, but should we define public ways as a town-owned, like a publicly owned, state-owned roadway?
A public way is a lot more than that. If you
Sidewalks and.
it includes anything in a way, any walking path that's owned by the town is a public way.
So I'm just wondering if calling out that it's owned by the public, meaning town, state, whatever, versus public, meaning that the public has access to it.
Well, more than that, it is town only because we can't,
Enforce.
the town can't do anything on state-owned roads. We can't enforce anything. We don't have the authority,
Like coming through the center of town, state road.
for example.
But, I mean, we can,
Okay.
I know that there's limited
We spent a long time looking at the definition of way. And we never found a simple, concise definition that was correct. And so we felt it was best to leave it to MGL to define it. If somebody really wants to look it up, it's there. And it's ugly.
Who has charge of public ways?
The Board of Public Works through its DPW. Other than than other statutes that call out authority. For example, the authority to catch speeders is limited to the police department. The authority to enforce jaywalking is the police department.
So in this case, if I might, section 5, written permission of the town official having charge of the public ways would be the superintendent.
Yes, generally speaking.
Okay.
And I think generally speaking, as superintendent and public safety, they usually generally coordinate together to ensure that it's not a public safety hazard, that.
So that would be up to the superintendent to work with public safety then,
As a
because
rule,
it only says of the town official having charge of the public ways, and public safety doesn't have charge of public ways.
They don't have the
So it's up
The
to the
ambulance is,
superintendent.
if an ambulance is trying to get somewhere and can't because it's blocked, they have to call DPW to get that stuff moved anyway.
Okay. So I'm just trying to clarify,
Yeah.
who is the town official? All right.
Yeah, a lot of this is written a bit more abstractly because that's the way Mass General Law likes it.
Tell me about
The
it.
town official, anytime you see town official having charge or responsibility, that phrase comes almost exclusively from MGL.
Okay.
For section 4, where the title of the section is interfering with snow removal or emergency services,
Mm-hmm.
so the A and B subsections don't mention anything about emergency services. Is there any need to specify that? It's more specific to removing snow and ice, and that the cost of removing cars can be.
The
Letter A doesn't mention anything about emergency services, just snow and ice removal.
right. So to back it up, this has to do with, I mean, the side effects of these, when you have a car parked, on a way that's not allowed to be parked. Since we have no parking on town roads, if someone is parked there, the DPW might find it when they're plowing, or an emergency service might find it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also blocking like fire hydrants. We don't have a ton of fire hydrants in town, but there are some. And so that's an emergency service, that's not and I don't know if in town there's any no parking like here to corner because the corner is too tight for a fire truck to make or an ambulance to make safely or something. So I look at it from that perspective also.
I think MGL defines intersections and corners and this sort of thing based upon a footage. And so it's so many feet before an intersection and this sort of thing. You're really not supposed to park in an intersection or, and I forget how many feet within it, but that's always been the way, and I know I got in trouble with the city of Worcester once for doing something like that, so you only want to do that one time, or they'll tow your car.
Okay.
So I have notes about these, we'll look at them.
All right.
Yeah, and the way I'm reading it to me it sounds like the owner of the vehicle, if it's towed, is only liable for that cost if it's due to the fact that they're impeding removal of snow or ice. It doesn't say anything about that if they have to remove the vehicle for an emergency service reason. That's what I'm.
Is there a
Question.
fine attached to that, Peter?
Oh, yes.
There is. Besides the charges and besides
Oh, yeah.
the costs of the removal? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it, just 5?
That's it.
Okay.
What I think I'd like to do, the very next one is scenic roads. So before we get into that, I thought we might go back and look at some of the changes that we've made based on previous review comments.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I am a little bit more of the mindset of kind of getting at least first eyes on on keeping these moving forward. I know it's kind of, we may have some low-hanging fruit that we can do, but also if we're trying to get through some, at least we can figure out where there's additional comments and feedback and then go back and I don't know. How's the rest of the board feel?
It is the board's pleasure, so.
I would tend to, if we can keep moving on some of these things,
Okay.
I would like to, I agree with you on that, yeah.
Move on.
Because I think that if we pick a Saturday, we've got time to go back and review those issues.
Right, rather than get caught up in.
Right, and do that now. That way, it gives us a clear understanding of how many more we have to go through.
Right.
If we get through this.
Now, my next question is, I know scenic roads is a beast.
Yep.
I think we have a quorum here tonight, I think all 5 of us are here, and it's not even yet 7, so I think we have time to start going through it.
Which one?
Scenic roads.
Okay,
So, is that, is
Okay.
the board okay going straight into scenic roads?
let's do it. I'm okay with it.
I see
Let's go.
heads nodding up and down. Okay. There are a lot of structural changes here. I think fundamentally, it was, the change here is to be much more clear on the process. And there are a couple of other goodies hidden in here that we'll talk about. But repair, maintenance, reconstruction, paving, road, tearing down, destruction of stone walls, trees, these definitions are, although wordy, straightforward. So let's get into the meat of things. On a town body, so there are several town bodies that can do this, that's mentioned, surprise it's not mentioned early. Oh no, it's okay, because any town body, or technically any official, can recommend a road be designated as a scenic road. That officials or that committee's, that body's desire, doesn't matter who they are, they have to follow the same process.
Is this only for town body and not for individuals?
Correct, because an individual to do it would do it through,
A town
Well,
body.
normally you do it through a town body so that you would recommend to the planning board or historical, whoever.
Okay,
And then that body would discuss it, and at the end of the day, they convince or they don't convince the body to promote it. If they're doing it any other way, they're probably doing it by citizen petition. Which
That's what I was
bypasses,
trying
of
to
course,
get at,
all
Peter.
of this.
That's what I was trying to get at, right, okay. So
But I
it's
think,
strict-
Harry, you bring up a good point, because in reading through it, it's not immediately clear that a citizen or a small group of citizens that live on a road or whatever that feel that would like it to be considered, that they should go through which boards or commissions
Some
they.
town body.
Right, which
Yeah.
boards or commissions or which town body, kind of, it almost misses that step to, I don't know.
Right.
So, if we look at forward to B, we'll go back there in a minute. Recommendation or request of the Planning, Conservation, or Historical Commission, the Select Board shall consider placement of an article in the next town meeting warrant to change the scenic road designation. That's an
So
important
just those,
phrase,
just those boards?
just those boards, because that's MGL.
Okay.
But I think I'm getting, and I think, Harry, I don't wanna speak for you, but if I understand correctly, I think we're getting at, but even before that point, if there's a group of citizens that live on 68 and say, we think 68 or this section of 68 should be designated a scenic road because of A, B, C, and D. It's not explicitly spelled out here that they must go through a town
Go through the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, or the Historical Commission,
or another town body or official.
who will have to all go
Right,
through.
which are still going to
those.
have to go
Yeah.
through those.
Right,
But
I guess what I was saying is that if, let's say you have people that live on a certain section of a road,
Mhm.
and they'd like to make that a scenic. My concern is, yes, we can offer that to individuals, but no vetting has been done or it hasn't gone through any board or committee. So with Leah's, how do we make sure that people know that if they want that, they have to go through a board or committee? Is that a policy? Is that something we post on the website? How do we do that?
Cause that's, I think some of the frustration in the past is people talk about thinking that something should be a scenic byway or scenic road, and Peter just put a pin in it, scenic road versus scenic byway.
Right.
But also, how to go about doing that, because it's, here it says that it's planning, conservation, and historic, but it doesn't explicitly say, like, it says that a notice shall be sent to those boards and commissions. Yeah.
The notice is sent because there's only going to be one body that drives the scenic road designation. And so it's an obligation of, in this case, the planning board, if that were the body, to notify Concom and Historical.
It's not going to be an overwhelming issue. I mean, scenic road is a pretty big deal for a lot of length of miles when you're declaring a scenic road. So it's not like it's just gonna pop out of nowhere. So, I mean, if you're talking about an individual or a citizen and they're one house on a particular road and they wanna make it scenic, that's, you know, a whole different issue. So, but my point was, if there is an issue there and something that these boards or commissions haven't thought about, how does a person get to those boards or commissions to think about it?
Seemingly, hello, testing. Seemingly to me, it would be a starting point would be the town clerk's office. In other words, okay, you're going to go there looking for information and probably get pointed to appropriate committee to move on from there, okay? In other words, you know, and I'm thinking Brentnell Drive is a scenic road in town, okay?
Yeah.
And that was done after much discussion, let's put it that way, okay? So in other words, so those things have happened, but, you know, nevertheless, in other words, if you are a resident of the town looking for information, I would say, you know, yeah, we're gonna start with the town clerk and let her point you to the appropriate committee, be it the planning board or whatever.
Or the select board has happened a couple times in the
As
last
well.
few years.
But for now, regardless of who wants to do it, it is only the planning board, conservation commission, or historical commission that
Has
has
to go
the
through one of those.
authority to move forward on scenic roads.
Correct.
Okay.
Which also lets somebody venue shop, but
But I think that's also a necessity, because I'm thinking back in recent iterations, a couple of the boards have been very against even hearing it until there was more push behind it. So I think that there is value to having avenues to at least get it out there. And we know from master plan and open space, the surveys and everything, that there is a good population in town that actually does value the preservation and the preservation of some of the more scenic or historic roadways in town. And so I think it's.
I mean, I can't think of, off the top of my head, too many more roads that could be scenic other than what we've already done. Because there are some that are hidden. I mean, you could call Turkey Hill scenic, for crying out loud, type of thing, you know? So.
That was one, Harry. We had that one come up a couple years ago on Historical Commission, Irish Lane. I
Yeah,
think Emerald, and I think Turkey Hill was on that list too.
yeah, that was that area was what I was thinking of, yeah.
was it Ridge or River that came up recently?
Oh, you're right, Peter. I think it might have been Ridge.
Ridge and Davis, I think, and Cloverdale.
And Cloverdale was the other one, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But they all fell through.
I guess that's to the planning board, but my question would be, if we go along with this, what are the implications of making a scenic road or cost to the town to maintaining a scenic road? So when we're looking
Well-
at how we're composing or looking at doing something in the long term, what is the cost to the town, and do the planning board, Concom, and historical commission understand that and take that into their purview when they look at it?
So the fast answer is that there is no cost to the town per se, with declaring a road scenic. What it does is it adds process to certain things along the way that deal with cutting trees is more restricted and changing stone walls is more restricted. Other than that, there's no fundamental difference in the way that the town treats the way.
Okay.
So now, some people have said, Brittenell is a scenic road and therefore it may never be paved. That is not correct. There is no such restriction. There is process for doing it. But there is nothing that says that a scenic road must be gravel or a scenic road must, no, there are no such restrictions.
And I think that's some of the process, and I'm speaking from when we went through it more recently, that was some of the process and considerations in the public information sessions, and even I think at town meeting, because ultimately I think it's a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
I'd have to go down to look, I don't remember.
Yeah, but I think that there is a lot of vetting that goes through once it's figured out how to get it through. But I think sometimes the frustration has been a group of individuals come forward and it just completely falls on deaf ears and is not even listened or looked at or anything. There's a bylaw, parts of town, some population of town want scenic roads, and to have an avenue to at least, maybe it doesn't make sense. And I think some of the public forum sessions were residents that came out and spoke that live on the entirety of the road or whatever. But I think that there has been a lot of hesitation to even hear it.
You know what's interesting? If Brittenell was indeed designated a scenic road, there is no signs on that road that says this is a scenic road.
Well, you actually pointed out what I was going to say next, which is that town can decide to spend money on signs, markers,
And that's some of the,
anything that the town would like to spend its money on for that.
and I think that that's been some of the consideration as how to get the word out. Some of the feedback that the surveys that I speak of, master plan and open space, speak to is there's not readily, easily accessible, readily available information for this. So I know, for example, the scenic byways is on 122.
Right.
There's a sign there that designates it as a scenic
Absolutely,
byway.
a couple of them if you go over
Yeah.
there.
That was done by the state.
Right, but that's
Yeah.
a state thing versus a town thing, and is there value to somehow marking these roads so that people that are either traveling on them on a day-to-day, looking to move in on them, whatever, know that they're designated, that it's a little bit more obvious.
Right, because if it's designated seated, like you said, now we gotta worry about what do we do with our walls? What do we do with trees on those scenic roads? If you're building a house or whatever, now that holds a whole different set of rules for you.
It does,
Something
but those,
like that.
I mean, I don't wanna minimize that. There are more rules, and the planning board and building inspector are responsible for that. So the building inspector is responsible for knowing when a new house lot comes up on Brittenell,
Okay.
what's going to be done to the trees near the right of way and to the stone wall, so that that's all clear, because there's an extra permit,
But
Well,
small asterisk.
I guess then what I'm saying is if this town decides to make a scenic road, then the town should have the money to at least notify people on that road that this is a scenic road. People that drive, I go down Brittenell and I had no idea it was a scenic road. You drive down that road, you're not looking at the scenery, you're trying to dodge potholes and ruts and everything else, so I mean, we shouldn't do
A
one
plug for the
without the other.
DPW, Brittenell right now is in great shape.
Okay,
Yeah.
Right
Yeah,
now.
right.
It won't be that way at the end of winter, I
Right.
know.
I was like, the
Right.
spring is gonna wreak havoc on all the dirt roads.
but if we're gonna designate a scenic road, then somewhere in here, we should have that it is up to the town to provide signage notifying that it is a scenic road. We need to have something.
Except that then you need to appropriate monies for that.
And you can't
And somebody needs to.
bylaw what monies, how money is appropriated.
Right.
Then, well, okay, then if they're recommending the planning board do this, or these individuals have a scenic road, then the article should also include the money for the scenic road. I'm saying outside the bylaw, but it should. We just shouldn't say, oh, we're gonna do this, and then nobody knows about it. That's kind of, I don't know, kinda.
I hesitate to make that an automatic, Harry. Again, just knowing what financial straits this town has had in the past, you know, forcing the town to buy signage, and again, I realize that's not a whole lot of money, but still something that would be required to designate might prevent any additional scenic roads from being created. I think
And
it's
for that matter, once signs are put up, the town is responsible for maintaining the signs, which means future year costs as well.
I don't disagree with it would be nice to have the signs up to indicate that they're there, or some sort of a map that we can put up on the website indicating where we have scenic roads in town, if there's not one there. But I don't know that I agree that we should force the.
I understand what you're saying, Jen. I just feel like all we're doing is making a good faith gesture and that's about it. We got a bylaw that says, here's what we can do, and after that, we walk away.
Well, but that's kind of the point. I mean, the intent of the scenic road is to retain the aesthetics of what that road looks like, and it's to put more quote unquote restrictions or more steps in place in order to change those features. So that to me is the more important thing, is if we want to have a scenic road and we want to maintain the aesthetics of that road, that this is the process that we do, and that having a sign up there that says it's a scenic road is more of a nice to have.
Yeah, and we don't, I don't necessarily want the funding to reiterate what Jen said, the funding to install or maintain any sort of signage be the reason that we can't designate a road as scenic. And I think, Jen, to your point, a lot of what's come out of, and I keep referring to master plan and open space, is getting the maps out and available, and with the website update and everything, once the plans are officially accepted, getting them out and doing kind of highlights on different aspects of town, whether it's scenic roads or open space or whatever, you know, economic areas or whatever. So I think that there is hope and dreams to do that. It's just, but
Yeah.
And I think as long as it's clearly communicated and in viewpoint permitting or however, that scenic roads, these are the scenic roads, and that automatically triggers additional steps for anybody that's coming in. I do think that Harry, to your point, that there's value to having the residents of that road, because the residents who maybe have built their home there know that it's a scenic road, but after a couple turnovers, do those new homeowners know that it's a scenic road and that they need to reach out to town if they wanna take a tree down or reconfigure the stone wall or whatever. And I don't know how best to do that. Obviously, they should be going through permitting, and not everybody does. So
I am deeply involved in this type of a process myself right now, being a member of the board of directors of a committee outside of the town, okay? There is just everything that Leah has mentioned about getting all the people involved, and that Harry is saying, you know, that people have the right to object and so on and so forth. We've been dealing with all of this, okay? And so, you know, it's partially residential and partially seasonal, okay? So, you know, people live there all year round, some people do, and some people come and spend their summers there, so, okay. So, you know, you've got to get everybody in line with what it is that you're trying to do. Probably there's a lot easier things that could be done, but at any rate, nevertheless, it is an involved process. I've worked with the DPW to get basic specs done and this sort of thing, and so, you know, yeah, it's an involved process, it really is.
Peter, what's the definition of scenic road again?
However, Mass General Law defined it, which is really generic, the attributes make it,
So it can be a dirt road.
absolutely. Or it could be paved, that doesn't matter.
I was gonna say, there were some paved roads on the last, like,
Yep.
I think Davis Ridge, there were a couple paved roads that were on it last time also. So it's not only dirt.
Okay.
Now,
And
one-
to Peter's point, there is a process if a road is designated if a dirt road is designated as scenic, there is a process for which it could be paved. It
the
doesn't.
town can use to follow.
Right.
And they have the same permitting problem that any other body would have to make that happen. But yes, it's absolutely possible to go either way.
But it definitely has to be a town road.
Yes, so that we would not be allowed to call Route 122 a scenic because it's not a town road.
And we wouldn't be able to declare a private way, the Glenwood Place Extension private
Right,
way
exactly.
as scenic because that's private, or I use that just because that's the one that always comes up, but there's
Sure.
other private ways that are.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Now go ahead.
No, it's a good thing. I'm just trying to get questions to clarify scenic roads in terms of who would bring it to a committee and the process we have to go through to get there. So, I mean, if somebody wants to do a scenic road, God, let them go for it.
I mean, I think
You know, I'm not standing in the way.
quite frankly, I think more recently, the residents have had the most success utilizing the historic commission to move things forward, and then the historic commission tries to push things collaboratively with conservation and planning. But I think more recently, the historic commission's the one that's been willing to listen and do some of the more primary vetting and hear things.
Okay.
I do want to point out the last few words of B, which are a significant change in the bylaw. Town meeting warrant to change scenic road designation. It is possible to make a road a scenic road, and it's possible to make a scenic road not a scenic road anymore. And the process is fundamentally the same, which is why we frequently say change scenic road designation as opposed to make a road a scenic road, much like it used to
And-
designate a road as scenic.
To skip forward a little bit, D says that a simple majority is required to designate it as a scenic road, where to undesignate it,
Right.
it requires a 2/3 majority, so it's not just at the whim of
That's true.
who's showing up at town meeting, there's a push to
So this is MGL or town?
This is town guided by MGL. So, I mean, MGL sets the guidelines under which we wrote the bylaw.
Okay. Can you go back up a little bit?
Yep.
Because a little bit more,
Come on.
no, where did I see that? Maybe, yeah, go up. Had to do with a portion of a road. Had to do with a scenic road, maybe it's down, had to do.
Somewhere, it is down somewhere where you can specify just a segment of a road as scenic.
So how do we say a scenic road is a road that has dimensions, depth, that has length, and all of a sudden the scenic road just becomes a little piece of that?
I would actually suggest that more than likely it would go the opposite way, where some group of citizens want their consecutive area of a road to be scenic. And eventually somebody says, the whole thing ought to be. But it could go either way, it absolutely could. And in
Okay.
fact, that's a good point. I need to change 4A to be partial. To make that clear earlier. And again, MGL is the thing that provides the ability to set an entire road or a portion of it.
Okay, okay.
So jumping back, I think I'm gonna rewrite this so that planning, conservation, and historical come up earlier, so that one of those, when one of those town bodies considers recommending a road, whether it's on its own volition or through citizen request, whatever. Again, to make it scenic or to remove the designation, that body has to hold a public information meeting. Notice it's not a public hearing, it's a public information meeting. But it specifically provides that the public has voice. You don't just hold it to say, to give outbound information, they are required to receive information.
But it says that the meeting, the public information meeting has to be approved by the select board.
No, the
notice
The
of
notice, the notice has to conform to select board policy for posting meetings.
So if I read A2, notice for said meeting, so this is about the public information meeting. Such meeting shall be held at least 7 days before the body recommends any change to the select board. Notice for said meeting shall be posted and published in a form and location approved by the, oh, okay, I see. To me, it reads that the select board needs to approve it versus the select board's.
It's the policy of the select board that drives where
So
and how it's posted.
Can it be reworded somehow then,
Yeah,
just to
I
say
have
that
better wording than that in other bylaws.
that it can just needs to meet minimum posting requirements or whatever for
Yep.
public information or whatever? Sorry, cause I kept reading that while we were talking even and trying to go through the workflow and I'm like, what?
I think these sections are backwards maybe, because I don't like the way that we're going backwards in time on the process.
Yeah.
The recommendation happens 7 days after, but this happens and the posting has to happen before that.
Right.
Yeah, let me look at the sequence. This is actually very important. This is not a public hearing, and so you don't. One of the concerns was the cost of mailing postage to every person along the way. Think how much more expensive that would be today for Brentnall than it was 30 years ago.
And I think you made comments, but Peter, just to confirm, make sure everything is a road or portion thereof, cause in
Yes,
D
yep, I've got
D
that.
and E, but yeah.
Okay. So after this public information session, when the time expires, the planning, conservation, or historical group body will recommend, well, if they believe it's appropriate, because that's their deliberation. If they decide that it's appropriate to change the scenic designation, they send it to you to say, hey, please put this on a warrant. And by the way, here's why we think it ought to change, which I would think would come out of the town meeting handout. So it seems to me, but we'll see. And as we said, simple majority to make something scenic, 2/3 majority, supermajority to make it not scenic, to change from scenic to not scenic. So that's the process of how something becomes or unbecomes scenic. This is these are what happens. This is what requires more approval than non-scenic roads. I wasn't thrilled with the writing, but I haven't found a way to say it better, so we're stuck with this for now unless we can find a better way. But so the tree warden can approve up to 3 trees for each 200 linear feet when somebody wants to change something. So
Okay.
a developer in town wants to add a subdivision, that's going to have a roadway and a driveway and all of that that goes in, but for every 200 feet along the road, which is unlikely to be more than one road, but they could do two and need to do it twice. They have to go before the tree warden based on the number of trees in the right of way. And if there are 3 or fewer that need to be cut, the tree warden can simply approve it. If it's more than 3, the tree warden has to hold a hearing,
Peter,
public hearing, yes.
I may have missed it, but is it defined anywhere what's considered in this specifically the right of way? How far off the roadway is
The
deemed
right of way is
under
defined as
jurisdiction?
what is taken publicly. So it's the entirety of the public way. So usually, when the town takes it, they take more than just the edge of the pavement.
Right.
But it varies from road to road based upon when it was done, because the practices have changed over time. So what is true for Campbell Street, which I live off or near, will be different from Brentnall because the right of way is a different width, which is very different from Palmagussit.
Well, and I guess I'm thinking of it less from a large developer standpoint and more from an individual homeowner's standpoint that might need to do some work and not realize, or like, that is, I guess, how I'm looking at it. I think the developers there's a process in place that the developers should follow. Now, whether they do and whether they're enforced to is, I think, a different conversation, but I'm looking at it more from like a homeowner's perspective or
Absolutely,
I mean-
if you don't know that's a scenic road and you start ripping down a stone wall and changing it, and
Whether
I
you
mean,
know-
that's-
Whether or not you know it's a scenic road, get back to Leah's point, every landowner is responsible for knowing where the corners of his or her property is,
right,
corners are. And so that tells them what's public, what's the way, and what is not. That's what defines the way.
the reason I say this, we had an issue recently on a road where where we were paving a road, and it happened to be on somebody's property, because when they paved it, it was on their property, not the right of way. So if that was a scenic road and they decided they had to move that stone wall because of the way things have been done, now they're in violation because it's a scenic road, if that was the case. That's where I'm looking at here in terms of that.
More often than not, the stone wall is the boundary. Much more often than not.
Okay.
Now, I can't say that's exclusively true because many stone walls have been broken, degraded, not visible. So we don't get to say in bylaw this. All we can say is what we're suggesting is you have to know where your property ends and where the town property begins. And if you cross that line, then you need permission. You need more permission if it's a scenic road.
I guess it's up to the individual to seek out whatever board or committee and ask them if this is gonna be an issue if I do my stone wall. I mean, that kind of makes sense.
Or the building inspector,
Or the building
you know.
inspector, right,
DPW, they can reach out to a number of people to find out.
right.
If the road has been accepted as a town road, okay, then, okay, and it's classified as a scenic road, okay? To me, there's still certain rules, in other words, okay, the town basically can go 20 feet off the center line of the road, or something like that, or 40 feet, and whatever it is.
Right, so it's still up to the individual.
And that is basically town property, all right? So if the town wants to do something with that property, it's their right. In other words, there was an argument with a gentleman down on Campbell Street there about the town mowing the side of the road, and he had he had various shrubs and whatnot put there, and the town came along and pretty much obliterated everything that he had done.
And I will bet money that he just didn't know where his property line is.
Right. Okay.
And not that I'm saying that's unusual. How many people believe they own so much property on on 122A that they don't own, which includes the town and where our sign is located. It includes, I was surprised when I saw the property markers staked out through the center of town to see how far back it went. It's quite a bit.
Yeah. That was a legal definition of 10 Rod Road.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm scrolling down a little bit to changes along scenic roads.
Mhm.
And we just went through number 1, and that made me go back to the right of way question, sorry. Number 2, it pretty much puts all the authority on the planning board
Pretty much.
to approve or not the painting, removal, or destruction of stone walls, whatever. And I guess initially one of my concerns is I think sometimes what's the intent of the bylaw and what does the public want? Because I think sometimes planning tends to be more pro-development, where historical tends to be more preservation of historical characteristics, and they're sometimes often at odds. And so is there value to having it not the sole authority, that there should be some other process? I don't know.
3 little letters. MGL. This is all dictated by MGL.
So it says it couldn't require written approval by a majority vote of the planning board and historical society.
Correct.
And I'd even be willing to throw in Concom. I mean,
Right,
if those are the 3 boards that have to make or are
Right.
able to, but at the same point, I think oftentimes historically in town here, the perception has been that planning and conservation tend to be more pro-development and historic tends to be more preservation, not, and I don't wanna say anti-development, but more preservation of
I
what's.
think that's the nature of the particular boards or committees.
Right,
I agree.
right.
Historical, that's their job.
But there are some communities that the planning and conservation commissions do much more value preservation of whether it's, and I'm not just speaking specifically about land, I'm talking about
Yeah,
character.
I don't.
And that's homes
no.
or structures or whatever also.
MGL dictates who makes the decision and who holds the hearing.
There you go.
So yes, it's all on planning.
So it's pretty cut and dried then. Painting, removal, okay.
So don't muck with stone walls without a permit is what it really, or
Right.
a special permit, I think. And then more trees than the 3.
Okay.
Okay, now I do want to say something about B for a second. Modification of stone walls that alters or conflicts with the characters of existing stone walls. If you have a field stone wall, what we don't want to have happen, and therefore the reason this is specifically written, is somebody says, I'm going to tear down this wall, but I'm going to replace it, so I'm not destroying it. I'm going to replace it with a really tightly packed horizontal, the fancy modern stone walls.
Right.
It's still a stone wall, but it is not in character with what was there before.
Okay.
For number 3, any person desiring to make changes requiring town approval shall submit an application in writing to the appropriate town authority. Essentially, that's DPW superintendent / tree warden. It's tree warden who generally, historically, has been DPW superintendent or planning board. Those
Yes.
are the 2 authority entities.
Yep.
With regards to this. I don't know that that's, I mean, I guess it is stated, but I don't know that it's explicitly stated. If it could be
Yeah,
more
I mean,
cleanly.
we've gone through that issue
Right.
on that, because the board specifically appoints a tree warden.
Well, I'm not
So-
talking about the tree warden piece, I'm talking more in this case, who the town authorities are, that it would be tree warden and or planning board, depending on what the issue
Wasn't,
is.
we specifically appoint a tree warden, but if there isn't one, that becomes the superintendent. So then, if that's the case, who is it? The planning board? But, or the superintendent who's a tree warden as appropriate, and that's the word that throws me off. And I know we don't wanna get into
Well,
it,
it's,
but that's the word that throws me off, as well as the Conservation and Historical Commission.
no.
I don't know what
no,
appropriate
no,
means.
Nobody has to do, if you historical and Concom are not involved in any of this section. Because this is all changes along the road. They were only involved in designating or undesignating scenic. This is all about if you're going to make changes along the way. That, if you remember back here, we said tree warden may approve 3 trees per 200 linear
Right,
feet of
right.
boundary along the road. So the appropriate authority for that request is the tree warden. And in fact, I would submit that all trees, all tree changes, whether it's fewer or 3 or more than 3, have to go with the tree warden, because at the end of the day, the tree warden also gets a public hearing for only trees. So if there are no stone wall changes, then the tree warden has to hold a hearing.
But if we go back down, that was, I guess what caught me is, that's really only for written after income shall timely forward a copy of said application to these individuals. They really have nothing to do other than they're required to get a copy of it.
Yes, because they have no say.
That's, okay, that's what was, all right.
So if they're submitting just for trees, then the tree warden would forward to planning, conservation, and historical. Even though planning and conservation and historical have no say in whether or not it's approved. It is merely to inform. One of those forced communication, damn it.
Well, that was evidenced by Hillside Road. Okay, got a phone call at 8:30 one evening from a woman down there who was quite upset that trees had been taken down, damage done to the stone walls, which were basically on her property. And so, she wanted to know who, what, where, when, and why.
Was it a scenic, oh, it was Hillside.
Yeah. So, pointed her in a direction and, walked with her on it and saw exactly what she was talking about.
Planning
Yeah.
board took up Hillside.
So I talked with
Several meetings ago.
National Grid, somebody who works for National Grid. And so I got a little bit clearer definition of how they do things, but yeah.
I'm gonna back up to 2D and E that we didn't actually review, but that has to do with paving. Especially E, changing the road surface from unpaved to paved.
That makes sense.
So all those require it. You have to have a written application. Skipping down, any work that requires town approval may not begin until all the approvals have been received. And you've got to tell both tree warden and planning board when you begin the work. Okay, actually, back it up. 5 is the emergency provision, which is a lot to do with what happened on Hillside, because there were trees that were dangers in the estimation of whoever, I don't know. But it did come before the tree warden and planning board after the fact because it was deemed an emergency condition, which is why the trees came down. You then have to notify tree warden and planning board when you do that. Now, that should not have broken stone walls, that's a whole nother thing, but.
I'm fully aware of what the procedure ended up being, yes.
And the other thing is that we specifically say, as acknowledged by a public safety official. So we don't have Joe Q. Public decide on his or her own that it's a threat to public safety and needs to be done now.
Okay.
And are utility companies considered a public official because it would be easier for them to take a tree down versus?
They are not generally considered public safety, to my knowledge.
I mean, obviously there are instances for sure, but sometimes it's also, it would be easier to take it down and not have to work around it. I don't know.
There is no provision in the bylaw for a utility to make that decision on their own.
And I just throw National Grid out there because they're the ones that generally come before us for
Right.
poll hearings and talk about trees, and sometimes we ask them to take trees down because they become a hazard, so
Sure.
it goes both ways, I'm not, but.
But to be equally fair, it doesn't take that long for them to make a phone call to chief or, police or fire chief and have them send somebody out to look at it.
Or DPW as a
Usual.
tree ward, like DPW even to say,
DPW is not a public safety.
no, but if the tree warden is the,
Well, the tree ward would normally request a public safety official. I
I
would
would
think,
hope.
in that case. Okay. Okay, so the planning board, tree warden shall be notified within 5 days, working days, of the commencement of work to eliminate a threat to public safety. Such work shall not be considered a violation of the article, however, unless it exceeds 5 working days. Then it shall be a violation of the article.
Right, so doing the work and notifying, there is no violation. Look, there's a public hearing. Within 30 days of receipt. We actually changed that from 60 days to 30 days. Used to say 60, look in the current bylaw, it's 60. We felt that was just too long.
Not timely.
You're gonna act in a timely manner. And 30 days is enough time to have one of those weird cases where where planning board doesn't normally meet for 21 days instead of 14.
As we've gotten this far, Peter, it seems like in order to get a scenic road, you've got to have these groups come together.
Mhm.
Once they come together and it's decided, now everything falls back to the planning board.
Correct.
that's I think where I struggle a little
okay.
bit also.
But it's not necessarily the groups. Any one of those town bodies can start the process. It doesn't have to be all three.
No, I mean, once the process is completed though, and
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
things need to be done, now everything again falls back to the planning board.
Because it could be the planning board didn't agree with it, but historical or conservation did
Right.
got it, not, I don't wanna say pushed
Got
it
the
through,
scenic
but
road
got
done,
the
right.
scenic
Town
road
approved it.
on, and the town approved it, and now it's
Yeah.
all the enforcement or the upholding piece is in a board that potentially may not.
I see what you're saying, but I guess unfortunately that it doesn't have to be any board can come into a situation like that. If it's not agreeable, if everybody doesn't have them,
Yep.
and,
I mean, we get held to task for a lot of zoning stuff that we have
Absolutely. We have no control
we have
over.
no control over, so,
Right.
so.
right.
Majority rules.
And again, B2 is straight out of MGL. We are allowed to hold both hearings simultaneously rather than one for the tree warden and a separate one for the planning board.
C is pretty broad when it comes to deliberation and decision.
Yeah.
But, I mean, historical values, that can be somewhat subjective.
They,
Aesthetic quality can be subjective.
most of these are subjective, and again,
It's the nature of scenic though,
Yeah,
right? The
exactly.
definition of
It's
scenic is
No, I mean
somewhat,
that the planning board will consider
Right.
those items.
right,
Yeah,
and again, I believe that every one of these come out of MGL.
Okay. All right.
Is there anything in addition to is there anything on the next page as part of this, Peter? No, okay. I'm curious, because this kind of came up before a little while ago in another similar situation where I think it was one of the developers wanted to cut down trees. There was discussion during the deliberation by the planning board about having the developer, however many trees he cut down, replace them with X number of trees. Is there something that could be added here for the planning board to consider?
It's not here, it's covered in a little while, there's a section called compensatory action.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I see it down number 2. Okay.
And in fact, it covers exactly the case you were talking about, Jen. You reconstruct the walls, plant trees. Oh, my mistake. I gave you the wrong 30 that was changed from 60. It's 3. The notification after the decision and notification, that's 30 days instead of 60 days.
Okay.
So the 30 days to hold the hearing is probably what it was before, but just didn't read my notes well enough. I will add that earlier section about the public information hearing, public information meeting is all new to us. Again, giving information out to the town in advance of starting hearings is probably a good way to go. Or before it comes up at town meeting.
Okay.
Oh, somewhere, I guess there was another change back. Somewhere, oh, no, it's not that one. It's all public meeting notice. Because we changed the threshold notification. Maybe it's down below, I don't see it right here. When notification for the public hearing comes in, 30 days. Why don't I see it? I gotta look for this even better to see where oh, there it is. All abutters within 300 feet, they used to say 100 feet, containing the property. So wherever they wanna do, abutters are considered for 300 feet in each direction of and across the street for that matter.
So you could
Of
have
the
2
proposed
abutters,
one.
not just 1 in that case. Your front footage is
Right,
150
you get
feet.
more input from the citizens.
Yeah.
And we could not find a usual hearing where a butter list could be larger than 300 feet. So that's why we chose 300 and not 500.
Okay.
And it's at the expense of planning board to send those, because it's a planning board public hearing.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
It's at the expense of the planning board to send the abutter notices because it's a planning board public hearing.
No, there is a mechanism for the planning board to get that's part of the application will also be
Oh,
the fees.
sorry, this is under the changes? What,
Yeah, that's where we are right now, is in changes.
okay, you had scrolled up and down looking for whatever, and so that's where I got lost.
Okay, I'm
is-
sorry about that.
So if it's changes, then yes, it makes sense. I thought it was under the original applicants where we had talked about not sending the abutter notices,
Right, so that doesn't need it.
but this,
For changes, there's a public hearing, not a public information session. That's one of the reasons that we differentiate them.
and then similar to any kind of zoning changes or any
Any
exceptions
planning
or.
board action, there's a planning board fee that goes along
Right,
with it.
right, that makes sense. Sorry for
Nope, that's okay.
getting lost.
All right, back to deliberation, notify. And send copy of the decision all around.
Is the form that they use something that they obtain from the town, or is it something that they produce themselves? or do we know?
No, the town would be able to provide the
Yeah,
form,
that's what I.
the application. Planning board has a suite of applications.
I was in, and I've never logged into Viewpoint as not a planning or whatever. Is there does it specify roads that are scenics by default? So if somebody were to go in on, well, let's keep picking on Britnell, and they wanna do whatever, and does it automatically say that it's a scenic and then potentially?
I don't believe there's a notification that's a scenic road, but the specific permits that you need, that list is populated by the attributes of the road that you're going to work on.
But do you have to know the attributes of the road for which you're doing the work?
No, I'm saying Viewpoint does that.
Okay, Viewpoint does.
So Viewpoint will set up different permits that need,
So-
appropriate for the project and the location you're putting it.
That I think was what I was getting at, is does Viewpoint somehow know what's a
I believe so.
scenic road and?
I don't think so, and Tamika might be able to speak more to this, because we, with the most recent issue that came up on Hillside, the commission was not notified that they were looking to take trees down. The hearing, or whichever, the hearing from the planning board ended up being canceled because it wasn't needed, but there isn't anything in that process that says this is a scenic road and that you need to follow a specific process. That's why National Grid started taking all that stuff down in the first place.
But that also wasn't done in concert with a building permit, which is how they would be informed what permits they need. So if there's
Okay.
no interaction with Viewpoint can't tell you what you need.
But I think also,
Yep.
and this is maybe where even our office, we as select board dropped the ball, because I think we had conversation, that was a poll hearing that we held. We held those poll hearings, and I think we asked about tree cutting, and they didn't think that there was any, but it wasn't.
On a prior board, you mean?
No, I think it was this board. I think that was
Yeah, poll hearing on Hillside.
yeah, and I think it never crossed anyone's mind that it was a scenic road designation. And again, just to everybody's, like, how to make sure that that information is
Right.
available
With
in
all
front
the-
and center.
I see what you're saying, with all the departments and commissions in town and the vetting process that is required, how did that get missed?
Right. Well, so we ultimately, the select board is ultimately the ones that holds the poll hearings for National Grid. And so in our process, we should have added to check the status of the road, whether it's a scenic road or
Should
not.
be added to the form.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that
Yeah,
way, go ahead, Jen, sorry.
Sorry, Peter Pacer made the recommendation, again, with this most recent thing, if there was a way we could add like a checklist item for poll hearings to add to the hearing information if it's a scenic road, again, just so we can be made aware, and National Grid can be made aware, or whichever utility, so they know the proper process to follow.
Right.
Yeah, it just kind of fell off the radar.
Right. I think that there are a lot of again, like we're finding, there's a lot of gaps and everything, so.
Okay, planning board may adopt regs. There we go.
I apologize, I have to probably sign off. I don't know if you're planning to continue. I can just
What's just
shut
left
down
here?
and come back on and see if you're still
Oh,
here.
we're just about done.
That's it, we are nearly done.
I was gonna say, Jen, I was hoping to just get through this and then
Yeah.
probably pick a Saturday. I don't know if you have anything in mind that works or doesn't work. For you, I know you need to go, but that was kind of my hope, was just to get
Yeah.
through this and then.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Wow, okay.
based on Peter's request, wanting everything to go to legal by the 18th of this month, that leaves us with the 9th or the 16th, right in the midst of all the holiday stuff for Saturdays, and rather short notice to try to shuffle anything. So,
Now, let's also be clear. We can send changes to legal review. We can send the whole body of bylaws and then 2 weeks later say, by the way, here are some changes. We've done that in the past. So the 18th is not a hard deadline to be done, just, it's the time when I think we have to send it off to them to let them do their thing.
And I personally would rather send stuff that is complete, that select board has viewed and has, not anything that's still outstanding, that still is outstanding, and get that off for them to start on and then work to address the things that we still have questions about or whatever. I don't know how, rather than send something and have them start reviewing and then say, just kidding, we have this that you
Yeah,
just
I
looked
think
at, there's changes.
There's some stuff that still requires a lot of discussion. There's some stuff that doesn't, and obviously we can send that off and get that started, once we get through our Saturday meeting, so to speak,
Right.
maybe that'll become more clear.
But I think even coming out of our recent meetings here, we have a chunk that could go to legal. Even tonight, we blew through a few. I don't anticipate that legal's gonna take much time to review
Listen,
those,
I don't
but
think there's a lot that needs more discussion. Might be 3 or 4, in my opinion, but the rest of them probably. Cause the more I reread them, questions come up. So, but that's only on a few, not a lot.
so, sorry, Jen, to keep you. I don't know if you're still there. So I don't know if the board feels to get back, I guess, to scheduling, take a break from this and look at scheduling. We wanna try to do the 9th or the 16th, then,
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Jen said she would probably be back, right? She said she had to step
No,
away
not
for a
tonight,
few
no,
minutes?
I think it's too late for her
Oh,
to come back.
okay.
cause I said we were almost done.
Okay.
Oh, so is she gone already?
No, she's still here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm still here.
Sorry, Jen, I can't see, sorry. Because we would be looking 9th or 16th are before the 18th, obviously. Then 23rd, which is the weekend of Christmas holiday, the 30th, which is the weekend of New Year's holiday. Then we would be,
Leah?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm done for December. I'm not gonna be able to give you any weekends.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured with holidays and kids and everything.
Yeah. January is different, but just leading up to the holidays, I don't think I can do it.
So then we would be looking at maybe January 6th, that's pushing it to get legal review back for everything, everything, I don't know.
I guess I'm open to, I'll leave it up to, I guess, everybody. I mean, I have availability on the 9th to 16th. And how much pressure is it gonna put on us if we try to get everything done in the first week in January? Unless we can agree during the week that these are the 12 things we can start to send off to legal. I know you wanna do everything at once, but
Legal has made it very clear, they want everything, they want a single bunch of everything.
okay, that changes the parameters then, all right.
Leah,
Yeah,
I know your goal is to get us all together, and I get that, but I trust this board. If you guys can get a quorum together and you wanna just knock it out, that's on you. I mean, I'm comfortable with that. If you guys,
yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. I mean, I know I try very hard because I think we all bring different perspectives to this, and also I know it's a huge time commitment and we all have a whole lot of stuff that we're juggling, so I appreciate you saying that, Tom. Thank you. Jen,
Is
Paul,
scheduling, I can do December 9th. The 16th, I'm available until noon. I am not available on January 6th.
Paul, 9th or 16th then?
Whichever.
I
Should we
guess,
aim for the 9th?
let's aim for the 9th, cause Jen can be there.
Mhm.
And if Tom's plans do change, he can be there, but, definitely the 9th, I would say.
absolutely, Harry, if I can
Well,
make it.
you can always be hopeful, Tom.
Or even,
Listen, maybe I can bug you on Zoom from my phone or something, all
I was gonna
right?
say, even if
Yeah.
there's anything that we're covering that you feel strongly about and you wanna pop in on Zoom or whatever, like,
Okay.
so an all-day affair, breakfast, lunch, dinner,
Austin will probably be there too.
beverages.
To get us,
I have no idea if he will or not.
I thought that was,
I suspect,
I
based
thought-
on our discussions, that he will
Yeah.
do his best to be here.
right. Okay, Saturday the 9th all day.
What time do we start?
I wouldn't go any earlier than 9.
9 was in my head, but I am,
But I don't have family issues like, kids for breakfast and all that kind of stuff.
If possible, I mean, if you wanna start at 9, that's okay. My son has a basketball game I'd like to go to at 9, so I can probably be there for about 10.
so maybe if we organize at 9 and then recap some stuff or whatever, and then Jen, you join as available? Does,
Yeah, as long as you're okay with that.
are you okay with that? I mean,
And then the rest of my day is free, so however long you
okay,
wanna go.
we might just go all night.
It could be a long day.
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah.
I would, yeah,
so at least we get the start. So Saturday the 9th, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock?
maybe 9:30, cause I feel like we have about half an hour till we start,
Well, yeah, I was
get here,
just
get
thinking of
organized,
Jen.
and then if Jen's able to, if we start at 9:30, get organized, open the meeting, get called to order, do the pledge, whatever, and then figure out where we are, and then Jen comes in shortly thereafter.
All right, I
Does
mean,
that-
we
is that-
gotta set a definite time if they're gonna have donuts or something for us for breakfast, so.
Is that okay with you, Jen?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And for both you and Tom, if there's anything that you feel strongly about or want to, make sure you have input, either send it to me, Austin, Tamika, and or, let us know and we can hold it, or pop on, make sure that it's a time that you could pop on for feedback or whatever. So I wanna be as amenable to input from everybody as possible.
Did we meet, Peter?
Right here.
Right here, okay.
And we'll be here, Jen, in the select board office, or
Okay.
meeting room, not office.
The Matson Redfield room.
Sorry.
All right, if you don't need me for anything else, I'm gonna hop off.
That's fine. I think we're just gonna finish up Scenic
Yep.
Road. If you have any other comments, would happy to listen to them before you.
I think my only concern is I feel like we've had a lot of issues come up where people, and I'm sure some of it is on our side too, where we don't verify scenic road and we approve the work, or it's the other way around. I wanna make sure if we can get procedure, policy, whatever in place to make sure that we identify scenic roads before anything that comes before us, we're aware of it, that might help with some of the steps in preventing some of the issues that we've come across. But it's almost like the scenic roads haven't really been taken seriously, and it's just, oh, mea culpa,
Right, right.
So as far as like the violations and fines, like I said, if we can put procedure in place on our side to make sure we know which ones are scenic roads before like poll hearings, et cetera. But as long as there's
Brittenell,
something.
Barrack Hill, Sassawana, Charnock Hill, Hillside, Intervale, and
Oh, wow.
Muscatog.
That many,
Yep.
Yeah.
Over 2 different meetings, years apart.
yeah.
But I think to Jen's point, definitely kind of bringing this list to the forefront for everybody, for our office, as well as the other boards and commissions that are permit issuing or granting authorities as well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely on my list for us, select board.
But that's the only thing I have.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for sticking around. Sorry to keep you.
Oh, no, thank you. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys in a few days.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
So it's 9 o'clock here on the 9th?
9:30.
9:30 here.
On the 9th.
I can't add or take away from violations and penalties.
Yeah, there's not a lot
You
here,
know.
it's just, yep, when you got when whoever cites has to send it to tree warden and or planning board. And then, depending upon the nature of it, whether it's trees or walls, tree warden and planning board, or both, define and provide written notice of, those are actually new words of required compensatory action, and the timeline.
The only question I have is, it's in MGL, is a lot of stuff is I'm sorry, I think that's a little animal up there or something.
Yes, it is.
It is we fine by day. Here we fine by week. Is that in MGL?
Our bylaws say that every day of a violation is a new violation. This bylaw, and I don't think it came from MGL, I think this is just historically in this bylaw, it's every week is a new violation.
That sounds odd.
Yeah, for kind of consistency's sake,
Yeah,
either everything
yeah.
is a weekly violation or
Right,
everything's daily.
$50 a day or $100 a
Right.
day, and how do you tell other people who have violated something that they're paying by the day, but if you violate the scenic road, now you pay by the
Well,
week?
one of the reasons for that here is that taking compensatory action is a more time-consuming thing. If you have to rebuild a stone wall, it's going to take more than a day, which means that after you know you need to do it, you're still collecting fines.
But I would say that that there needs to be an initiative that you're working towards doing the work, so, and it's not just like, oh, I went out and I started it and then I'm gonna wait a week and I'm gonna go out and do something else. In my head, it needs to be, obviously rebuilding a stone wall or planting trees, you need to get trees or whatever the action is. But as long as there's corrective measures being taken in a timely, consistent manner, I would be okay without it being a daily fee, without being assessed daily, but otherwise, I think,
I see what you're saying, Peter, yeah, because it is, the violation is, until the violation is remedied.
Mhm.
So if we're doing a stone wall, that could take a week.
Or as
I-
Leah says, if
honestly-
you have to order the right species of tree, getting that will take time. Now, there's always some element of reasonableness. It's January, we're not gonna get a tree for 4 months. Are we gonna get fined every week for the next 4 months? Probably not, because there's a reasonableness to it,
But if, see, here's where we get into this conflict. We have, say, $50 fines. So somebody, if they're 7 days, that's $350 they're gonna pay. If we have a $50 fine for a week, that's still $50 for the week. So we should change our fine parameters for this thing if we're going to be consistent across the board. You can't say, Joe, I'm sorry, your car sat on the street or it wasn't there and you didn't get it, we're gonna charge you $350. But this guy who violated the scenic bylaw, we're only gonna charge him $50 a week. So that's where I'm conflicted.
right, I feel like that there should be some level of reasonableness in this, that I guess I lean more towards it's a daily violation, but there's some level of reasonableness that it's called to your attention in the middle of the winter and clearly stuff can't get done. You're aware of it, we're marking that you're aware of it, then as soon as reasonably constructively,
Right,
whatever
there'll
possible.
be a date when they need to meet it.
And also, similar, it's not necessarily until it's completely remedied, but until the actions are taken and consistently taken, because we also know that there's gonna be people that play the game that, oh, well, I added 4 rocks to that stone wall, I'm working on it. And then 3 weeks later, I added 4 more rocks to that stone wall and I'm still working on it, versus I'm working on obtaining the rocks or whatever and actively working to get it done.
Yeah, see, there's no timeline here. It just
But
says until
timeline
the
is
violation
defined.
is remedied to the satisfaction.
Yeah.
It doesn't say this must be done in 2 weeks, and then the fines start daily after that. So I'm just, not that it's bad, it worked, but it just doesn't seem to be consistent with the rest of our fines.
Yeah, I think that's where I struggle a little bit, is that if we're trying for continuity and connectedness,
You know what? Why don't we think about it, if that's okay, Peter?
Sure.
I mean, no sense in taking another 20 minutes to debate this thing. Is that okay with?
yeah, I mean, and maybe the bylaws, the ad hoc bylaw committee can look at things holistically also and work out, you know, I don't know how to bylaw it to allow some sort of reasonableness, and also,
It's in there when it says is subject to fine. Subject to does not mean a fine shall be issued.
right, but also I think where I struggle is if we try to go the daily route, which I'm personally a proponent of going the daily route, but also allowing it to be reasonable improvement increments. And so I struggle with saying that you're gonna be fined every day until it's complete, as long as you're legitimately making an effort to get it complete and not playing the game of.
Well, you do have to be a little careful because I don't know, this might be a good question for town council. If you start fining for somebody and then stop, can you restart fining someone for the same offense?
Well, and that's what I'm trying
That's
to
a-
avoid a little bit
Right.
also,
Yeah.
is-
And again, they don't have to fine at all. It is simply subject to fine,
I don't know,
so.
I know it doesn't cover us, like we're not worrying about it, but how do other planning board zoning bylaw infractions work? Aren't they daily? Like there's generally a cease and desist order issued, and then there's potentially the subject to.
Most fines are daily. I can't say they all are, but most fines are daily.
So Harry, I appreciate that comment from you, that I think for consistency and continuity, that if we can somehow try to work
Rework the language a little bit by putting in, is subject to a fine each day until the violation is started.
I can just strip out is subject to a fine. We don't need to say each week because the fine table defines the frequency of the fine.
Define just subject to the fine table?
Yeah, so I don't even need to say that because
Oh.
all fine tables are there. So we don't need to say anything here.
Okay,
It can be worked out in the fine table rather than in the bylaw.
all right. Subject to the fine table until the violation is remedied to the satisfaction. Okay, that might work. Sure.
So we have this, I think, good feedback, and Peter, that took less than half an hour, I think, or just about half an hour to get through. 7:40,
Okay,
about when we started. So we, I think, are posted for another bylaw meeting on Monday night.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
And then and that's here at 6, and then we just booked the Saturday the 9th, 9:30 here.
Yep.
For the long haul. And then hopefully we'll be
See where we are.
done or mostly done.
Yeah. your
So,
concern, Peter, kind of is legal getting it done to be ready for the,
Well, believe it or not, I'm not concerned with the first 6 chapters because they've already seen them once.
Yeah.
They've already done, so those have already been through legal review. It's everything after It's chapter 7 and chapter 8 that are brand new to them.
And they have said that they want to see it in its entirety and not like the first,
Not,
Like
yeah,
6
none of
chapters,
this
and-
first 5 chapters and 4 chapters, like, none of that. They don't want that.
because I think they've seen a lot of these multiple times and
I'm sure they've,
through different board
with all the
iterations.
towns they represent,
Well, even from us, I think.
yeah.
Okay, so is there any other business to come before the board? We were only posted for bylaw review, so
No. Make a motion to adjourn?
Harry
Second
made a
motion.
motion and Paul seconded it. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Tom, what?
Tom,
I was gonna start with Tom.
Galvin, aye.
second I.
Matt's and I.
Whitman, I. We're adjourned at 8:10.